Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the Morning Cafe right here on TV 47. Today we are having a very special discussion. Of course, we know coronavirus is here with us, not just in Kenya, but globally too. And we'd like you to understand all matters COVID-19, coronavirus as we'd like to call it. And we have someone in studio to help us understand all matters COVID-19. Of course, we won't cover everything because coronavirus is a wide topic, but we'll try as much as possible to cover as much as is of benefit to you. And so we have in studio Samson Oniok, who is a research scientist and of course also a virologist, here to help us understand all matters COVID-19. In case you have a question or you'd like to call in, you can call in through the number on your screen. Also tell us exactly where you're calling from so that you can also pose your question, and we'll be sure to make sure that your questions come through to the virologist. Samson, how are you doing?
I'm good.
It's good to see you. You know, Samson, a lot has been happening. There are certain myths about coronavirus, and of course also people speculating on how coronavirus operates, why we have to wash our hands consistently, why we have to sanitize. Those are questions people need to understand, whose answers they need to understand. But first off, I want us to begin, Samson, by understanding COVID-19. We do know that COVID-19 is the infectious disease caused by recently discovered coronavirus, but there's also the information coming through that coronaviruses, which means there are other viruses, strains of coronavirus, are largely a family of viruses which may cause illness in animals and also humans. But help us understand, what exactly is coronavirus?
Thank you, Leah, for having me. First part, coronavirus, or rather COVID-19, is a respiratory infection which is caused by a strain of coronavirus known as SARS-CoV-2 that emerged in China late last year, that is around December. And it has spread to almost more than 200 countries and causing like over 6 million infections and around 400,000 deaths across the globe. So yes, as you said, coronavirus is a family with a wide number of strains. COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 is just one of them. So to this extent, SARS-CoV-2 is the 7th strain so far. So previously we've had 4 strains that are endemic to human population, and then now we have 3 strains that are pandemic or rather epidemic in nature.
Okay.
So among the 3 strains, we have the first 2 which occurred in, the first one was SARS-CoV, which occurred in November 2002. And it killed around 700 people, causing around 800 infections across the globe. And then the second was the MERS-CoV, which emerged in the Arabian Peninsula, the MERS-CoV. And now currently we have the SARS-CoV-2, the cause of COVID-19.
Samson, what is the relationship between coronavirus and how it affects the animals?
Yeah, coronavirus is a zoonotic pathogen, meaning it's a virus that spills over from animals, that is most probably wildlife, to human beings. And what causes this is, remember, there is a way human beings are encroaching into the wilderness, and in the process we are increasing the interface between wildlife and human beings. So because of the increased interaction, we amplify the chances of the viruses or whichever pathogens spilling over from wildlife to humans.
And you know, there's been a question, people who keep pets, are they able to contract coronavirus just by maybe keeping pets, and pets in this case, if possibly they were infected with COVID-19?
It depends. Of course, there has been studies which report infection in pets, like cats, dogs. We've had also, like in the zoos, the cheetahs, tigers have been reported to have contracted the infection. But pets, because we really don't know which animal, what we know it's jumped from an animal to human beings. But there is no, I can't say with certainty that an infected pet can transfer or transmit this virus to humans, because viruses behave differently in different hosts. Probably assuming your pet is a cat, maybe it gets into a cat and it ceases to be pathogenic, such that even if like you get the infection, you cannot fall ill. So it depends. So that is still requires some investigation if indeed pets can pass coronavirus to human beings, the COVID-19 to human beings.
All right. Well, we do know that one is able to contract COVID-19 by perhaps, touch, and of course, like we've seen there, droplets of saliva. But help us understand, in terms of transmission, why is it so important for us to wash our hands as often as we can?
We call it hand hygiene. It's very important. It's the most important preventive measure in the fight against COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. Remember, like when somebody sneezes, and that's why before even like the washing hand thing or culture was more like advocated. You realize the greetings, shaking hands, that was the first thing to be banned, because people have a culture when they cough, they use their hands to cover the cough. When they sneeze, they use their hands to cover the sneeze. And in the process, you pass the pathogen to your hands, or rather like you just sneeze in an open place, let's say on the table, the doorknobs. And so like when someone touches such contaminated surfaces, the high chances of picking a virus. And when now with your contaminated hands, you touch your face, maybe the nose, the eyes, then you are now transferring the virus from the contaminated surfaces into your own body. So this is why hand hygiene is very important. When you wake up, before you touch anything, make sure you wash your hands. When maybe you went out shopping, you're coming back home, make sure you wash your hands. Before you eat, maybe nursing mothers, before you you change the diapers. After doing that, it's like washing hands. We cannot overemphasize that.
Samson, help us understand, how does water, washing of hands with soap or whatever kind of soap you'd be using, how does it affect the virus itself in terms of its operations?
Okay, the virus, SARS-CoV-2 is an enveloped virus. So it has a lipid layer. And lipid, this is kind of a fat. And is a hydrophilic in nature, those who understand chemistry. Now when you take soap, you soap your hands, and then you kind of you apply friction, you realize the lipid layer will be interacting with the soap, and they will kind of be pulling apart. And in the process, you are disintegrating the lipid layer, which covers the virus. And now you're exposing the genetic material. And once that is exposed, the virus is inactivated. Again, when we're washing, people forget it's not about applying soap. You can even wash with water without soap. What is important is even applying the friction. You must make sure when you're washing your hands, you apply friction, not just greasing because you believe you have soap in your hands. You must apply friction, and that also helps to break the bonds, kind of melting the lipid layer that is surrounding them.
Even as we talk about the prevention of COVID-19, Samson, I think, as you have mentioned, the whole idea of making sure that you apply a lot of friction so that you can actually, kill the virus itself using water or using water and soap. I think the other question would be, initially there was speculation. Is it airborne? Is it not airborne? Can you tell us if it is?
First, the main channel of transmission is through aerosols or the droplets. Like when you sneeze or cough, you're kind of like producing a spray of aerosols. And now, depending on the size of droplets, they can travel a distance. And that is why this is what the basis of advising people to kind of try keep more than a meter, a distance of more than a meter. Now, aerosols, like when you sneeze, you produce that spray, it is very easy for you to transfer the virus to somebody who is close to you. And when it comes to airborne, there are some reports that is a possibility of being airborne, in the sense that the virus particle can be like airlifted for some time and transported through some distance beyond even the 1 meter. So there is that possibility. The virus particle can be airborne and transferred beyond 1 meter. So like even if you are walking, you are keeping safe distance, it's always good to like augment that with masks, because you never know.
All right. And when we look at the impact of COVID-19 on health, most people infected with COVID-19 virus experience mild to moderate respiratory illness and recover without requiring special treatment. But for some, it's very critical. But help us understand, how is it some who are infected with the virus experience mild symptoms and illnesses?
So risk categories, we have different categories. People who are at risk of developing severe disease when they contract this virus. Number one, the elderly, 65 and above. Number two, people with underlying illnesses like diabetes, renal problems. This is because your body is already battling some kind of problem. It's a disease or infection. And because this is a virus that has high impact on your immune system, already your immunity is committed to fighting some other diseases. So you are kind of compromised immunologically. So when you contract this disease, there is so much work for your body to do, and at some point it gets overwhelmed. But people who are like the young people, you realize it's believed their immunity is okay, and they are able, like they contract it, it just gets mild symptoms or mild disease. It doesn't progress to a severe disease, and it can just recover from home without even seeking medical attention in the hospitals. Maybe simple rehydration at home and just isolating yourself, and you can recover.
But let's look at those who are greatly affected. If you can help us in terms of the operations of the virus in the body, help us understand how this actually happens.
In the body, okay.
Yeah, in terms of those people who suffer more illnesses, what are the predisposing factors? Because like we've mentioned, some experience moderate respiratory illnesses. In fact, even some are said to, some of them are told they don't need to get treatment, but perhaps isolate for some weeks as they try and take care of themselves from their house?
What predisposes you first to contracting the infection is like interacting with people already infected. That in itself predisposes you. But now what puts somebody at a risk of developing illness to like severe levels is like what I told, compromised immunity and underlying illnesses. But how it progresses to the point where it leads to the disease until someone dies is, these are virus with there is a way the virus interacts with human cells. So assuming there is some particle, the virus particle which is floating in the air, it gets into contact with your mucosa, the mucosal membranes, maybe in your nose. And then through its receptor, we call it angiotensin enzyme converting enzyme 2, it aids the entry of the virus to the cells. So the moment the virus gets into your cells, it begins replication. But before that, there is an incubation period of, median incubation period of 5 days before the onset of first symptoms. But now, up to the 11th day, you realize most people shall have developed the symptoms from infection day to the 11th day. So first of all, like the fever or somebody kind of the dry cough and all that, that is because the virus is replicating in the upper respiratory, because we have two parts that it infects. Mm-hmm. Unlike the other coronaviruses that cause common cold, that only affect the upper respiratory system. This one also affects the lower respiratory system, which includes the lungs. So the virus replicates in your mucosal membrane cells and then travels through your throat. It affects it infects the entire respiratory, goes to the lungs. It perforates the lung cells, destroys them, and now you can imagine, you take the lungs are like a sponge, or kind of a piece of a mattress. And that is something very light. It allows you to breathe. But now when the virus gets in, it destroys, it perforates the cells. It's kind of now your lung, you take like a sponge and you dip it in water. Mm-hmm. It becomes very heavy. Mm-hmm. So this is like someone is drowning in their own fluid. So once that happens, realize now the barrier between the lungs and the extracellular part of the body is breached. And now the lung will just be sucking the fluid. Now this makes it difficult for you to breathe. That is why now some people realize they have to be assisted with the ventilators, because now the lungs cannot operate on their own. So this is what happens until somebody now leads to the multi-organ failure, mm-hmm. septic shock, until mm-hmm. now your body cannot function, and then finally the person dies.
Well, Samson, even in understanding COVID-19, I think there's a question that many have been asking. How long does it take after exposure to COVID-19 for symptoms to actually develop?
Averagely 5 days to develop 5 symptoms. But by 11th day, the majority of people who have contracted the disease shall have at least shown some symptoms. That is why you realize if people are taken to quarantine, it has to be 14 days. So that is the safe period, mm-hmm. whereby when 14 days elapses before showing the symptoms, especially if you have been in contact with somebody who is already tested positive, then probably chances that you did not contract the infection are high. Mm-hmm. So 5 days, first symptoms, but for everyone by 11th day, you should have shown the symptoms of infection.
All right, and how soon should someone get treatment? Because we know there are some asymptomatic cases that have been reported, and I think the question would be then, how soon do you seek treatment?
Treatment, we can't say you're seeking treatment per se, mm-hmm. because there is no treatment to this disease. Mm-hmm. So what we do is simply manage the symptoms. That is why I remember at some point through the daily briefings, the authorities were saying, like, you quarantined if you're infected, they wait you develop symptoms, then they begin to manage that. So to answer your question, how soon is when you start developing the symptoms. Now what you'll do, you'll just be managing the symptoms. If it's like you kind of dehydrated, you put into like fluids. If like it's cold, they just try to manage those symptoms. Maybe it's headache, chills, mm-hmm. Sore throat in some instances. So those are the things that the medics will be managing.
Okay. And when we look at the survival chances, and even before we go there, if you can mention further, Samson, some of the symptoms. We've talked about asymptomatic cases, meaning people who actually have the virus but they're not showing any symptoms. I mean, how do you even tell when you have the virus when you're not actually showing any symptoms from your body?
Now, that is the challenge, which is why 2 stages in managing this disease are important. Screening and now the detection. Because asymptomatic cases, you can say, really contributes to the spread of this disease stealthily, because you cannot know who has it. So when we have somebody screening, this means when you do screening, you want to know the travel history of the person. Have they just come from a place which had the infections? Have they been in contact with people who have been confirmed positive? So once you do that screening, you can say that in as much as this person is asymptomatic, he could be carrying this virus. So let us place him or her under quarantine to monitor. If by this number of days, 14 at minimum, he or she shall have not been developed symptoms, then you discharge them. But asymptomatic cases are the real challenge in trying to mitigate the spread of COVID-19.
If I can just ask a question, that's what I'm asking myself, and I guess maybe someone else is also asking this question. These asymptomatic cases, do they ever exhibit symptoms in the future, ever?
Yeah, probably, because you see, when you contract the disease and you don't show the symptoms, you don't even fall ill. Of course, the virus is in your body. Now what will happen, the body will register a memory, what we call now natural immunity. So once the body registers a memory, in case there is a future infection, it will be able to remind itself that, okay, at some point in the past we had contracted this infection and now it's time to fight it. But again, in regard to COVID-19, it has not been shown with certainty how long those antibodies, somebody who had it, was asymptomatic, is now cured, how long the antibodies can protect such a person from contracting the same disease in future. So I can't say with certainty that once you get the disease, you healed or you cured, then the chances of contracting it again in future are minimal. There is still no evidence as to how long the antibodies that you acquire after infection will really protect you.
Okay. Let's look at survival chances. Many people, of course, are afraid of contracting COVID-19. But when you look at the survival chances of a person who has contracted COVID-19, what would you say?
Survival chances are very high, very high. 80% of people who contract COVID-19 survive. Mm-hmm. So that is why you realize in as much as the number of infections are in millions, we still have deaths in terms of hundreds of thousands. So if you use that to calculate the fatality rate of COVID-19, you realize it's very low. If you compare this with MERS-CoV, which infected around 2,000 people and 700 died, you realize the fatality rate of MERS-CoV is very high compared to COVID-19. And even if you compare with the SARS-CoV, the 2002 outbreak, which infected around 8,000 people and killed around 800, again you realize the fatality rate is higher than the COVID-19. So from that statistics, we can tell that survival chances when you contract COVID-19 are very high. It's not a death sentence, and that's why people are advised you should not put much pressure on health facilities. Mm-hmm. When you suspect you infected, first of all you can contact your personal doctor, you talk to him or her, you explain the situation, and then you stay at home, you isolate yourself, you try to manage, but at the same time again monitoring the symptoms. If they worsen, now you seek medical attention. But in most instances you realize it will just resolve by itself. So as in terms of fatality rate and survival chances, the chances of survival are high when you contract COVID-19, save for the persons with underlying cases or even the elderly. And we've seen even the elderly, so people who are like over 90 years old, seen some news, they recover from that infection. So it also means that like being an old person, it's not like once you contract it, you have to die.
Samson, how far have we come in trying to develop a vaccine or treatment for COVID-19?
Our treatment vaccine, there is no definitive treatment for this. Like I said, it's just managing the symptoms. And people have like touted chloroquine, which is anti-malarial and autoimmune diseases, is used to treat malaria and autoimmune diseases. And then we have the remdesivir, which was initially manufactured for like a treatment of Ebola. It has shown some promising results, but again, not in regards like clearing the virus, but just managing the symptoms. When it comes to vaccine, I think so much is going on in the research field, but from the experience we've had with the previous pandemics, we can say we still have a long way to go. I can give an example of something like polio. Polio, the first case was in 1908, and it took around 50 years to develop the first vaccine. You can imagine that. Ebola, the first outbreak or the first case was around 1976, and it's only up to December last year. So from 76 to last year, that's when we got the first vaccine. And so now the coronaviruses, the first identity was in 1960s. Up to now, we haven't gotten a vaccine. So that shows how far, in as much as we have promising results. Like I remember in March, the first vaccine candidate for COVID-19 was got to the preclinical stage, and we have like over 100 promising vaccine candidates which are being tested now. Some are in exploratory stage, some are like in preclinical, some are yet to get to human trial stage. So even if we fast track this, I think the earliest we can get a vaccine is maybe next year, and not a fully fledged vaccine, just a vaccine which has been like commissioned for like emergency use. So much goes into this. And especially because COVID-19 is like is a new strain of virus, and we need to like also get the exact target, which is known as like the vaccine candidate. Which among are we using the live virus? Are we like kind of inactivating the virus, injecting it direct as a vaccine? Are we getting peptides, proteins? So much has to be done. And also because we have different populations which react differently to different vaccines. Also different categories like old people, pregnant mothers, children. So you must put all these people into account for you to get something that is very effective. So we still have a way in terms of vaccine development.
And we do hope that we do actually develop one. Samson Onyok, research scientist, also virologist, thank you so much for making time. And we hope to have you again to tell us a little bit more about COVID-19, helping us understand all matters COVID-19. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that has been a look at coronavirus, helping you understand some of the questions that many of you have asked. Of course, some answers online, but it's also good to understand them farther than just what you read online. And this is what this particular segment will be doing for you every Wednesday, just talking to you about all matters COVID-19. This is where you'll get all the information that will help you understand coronavirus. Right now, I want us to take a short break. When we return, we take a look at all matters photography, understanding what's trending now and how you're able to monetize your art and skill of photography. So don't go too far. We'll be back shortly.